I saw it all, every glance, every trembling breath, like a story written in shadows. The town was small, tucked against the coast where the air carried salt and secrets that clung to your skin. Laura was a woman you couldn't ignore, 38, with eyes like a fading ember and a figure that turned heads under the soft glow of dusk. Her dresses were simple but tight, hinting at curves that seemed to whisper trouble. Her husband Mark was a mechanic, hands stained with grease, always working late, leaving her to drift through the quiet streets alone. That's when she crossed paths with Jake, the neighbor's son, barely 22, all sharp jawline and reckless hunger in his eyes. I'm just an observer perched on my porch with a glass of wine, watching life unfold like a play I wasn't meant to join. It was Laura's birthday, a day that should have been bright, but Mark was stuck at the garage promising to make it up later. Jake, though, he noticed her. He was home from college mowing his parents' lawn shirtless, his skin gleaming under the late summer sun. Laura was on her porch, a glass of rosé in hand, her dress slipping slightly off one shoulder. I saw the way she watched him, her eyes lingering on the flex of his arms, the way sweat traced the lines of his chest. It started small, innocent enough to fool anyone. Jake called out, offering her a slice of cake his mom had baked for her birthday. Laura laughed, a sound too bright, too charged, and invited him over. They sat on her steps, the cake between them, but it wasn't the sweetness of frosting that held their attention. His knee brushed hers, and she didn't move away. Her laugh softened her eyes locked on his, and I swear the air grew heavy, like the world knew what was coming. The sun dipped low, casting gold across her skin, and Jake's fingers lingered on the plate, brushing hers as he handed her a fork. That touch, it wasn't just a touch. It was a spark, the kind that could burn a life down. Laura knew better, knew the weight of her vows, the ring on her finger. But Jake's eyes, they were young, wild, and they saw her in a way Mark hadn't in years. They talked longer than they should have, the conversation drifting from small talk to something deeper, something dangerous. Her dress clung to her thighs, the hem riding up as she leaned closer, and his gaze followed, bold, unapologetic. I saw her breath catch her lips part, like she was teetering on the edge of something she couldn't name. That night I couldn't sleep. Their moment burned into my mind. Laura with her steady life, her husband's quiet love was slipping. Jake was a fire, and she was drawn to it, her heart racing toward a mistake she couldn't stop. I wondered if she'd pull back, if she'd remember Mark's calloused hands, the life they'd built, or if she'd let herself fall, let the heat consume her. I didn't know how far it would go, but I felt it coming, dark as the night, heavy as the tide. The days after Laura's birthday were a slow descent into forbidden territory. She found excuses to linger near Jake's house, watering plants, checking mail, her dresses a little shorter, her smiles a little sharper. Jake played along, mowing the lawn more often than needed, his eyes finding her across the fence. From my porch, I watched it unfold, a story written in stolen glances and unspoken promises, each one pulling her further from the life she'd vowed to keep. One afternoon, the sky was heavy, clouds rolling in like a warning. Laura was in her backyard hanging laundry, her dress catching the breeze, outlining every curve. Jake was there, fixing a fence post for his parents, his shirt off his skin, glistening. I saw her watching him, her eyes tracing the lines of his shoulders, the way his jeans hung low. When he caught her stare, he grinned, that reckless grin that promised trouble. She blushed but didn't look away, her fingers pausing on the clothesline, her breath quickening like she was already lost. They started meeting in secret, quick moments when Mark was at work. The backyard became their stage, the tall grass their shield. I'd see them there behind the shed, standing too close, his hand brushing her arm, her fingers lingering on his wrist. I could almost hear her thoughts, the war inside her, Mark's steady love against Jake's fire, the way he made her feel alive, like her blood was singing for the first time in years. Her laughter was different now, charged like she was chasing something she'd never catch. One evening it went further. I was out walking, the air thick with the scent of coming rain. They were behind her house, hidden by the shed, but not hidden enough. Laura's dress was unbuttoned at the collar, her hair loose, catching the fading light. Jake's hands were on her waist, pulling her close, and her fingers dug into his shoulders like she was holding on for dear life. Her breath came in gasps, her eyes half closed, lost in a haze of want. I froze, my heart pounding, knowing I should turn away, but unable to caught in the raw, desperate heat of their moment. When they parted, Laura's face was flushed, her lips swollen, her hands trembling as she fixed her dress. She whispered something to Jake, her voice soft, urgent, and he nodded, his eyes still locked on her like she was the only thing that mattered. They slipped away, but the air between them crackled, a promise of more, a vow that would break everything. I went home, my mind racing, wondering how long they could keep this up before it all came crashing down, before the fire consumed them both. The affair grew bolder, hungrier, a beast that fed on stolen moments. Laura's lies to Mark piled up, late errands, visits to friends that never happened. Her eyes betrayed her, always drifting to Jake's house, to the promise of his touch. He was her addiction, and she was hooked, her body alive with a reckless energy that made her glow. From my porch, I watched her unravel, her life with Mark fading into a shadow she barely noticed, her heart consumed by a fire she couldn't control. One night the town was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Laura slipped out, her silk dress clinging to her curves, a scarf trailing like a whisper of sin. She met Jake behind the shed, under a sky lit by flashes of lightning. They didn't speak, not at first. His hands found her hips, pulling her close, and her fingers traced the lines of his chest like she was memorizing him. The rain started soft, then harder, soaking her dress until it was nearly transparent, outlining every curve, every shiver. She didn't care, and neither did he. They moved inside the shed, its walls creaking under the storm's weight, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and desire. I followed, drawn to their story like a moth to a flame, knowing I shouldn't but unable to stop. Through a cracked window I saw them, Laura pressed against a workbench, Jake's hands sliding up her thighs, his lips finding her neck, her breath hitching with every touch. It was a storm of its own, their bodies a tangle of need and desperation, a dance of forbidden want. Her whispers were soft, pleading, his rough, urgent, each sound a betrayal, each touch a wound that cut deeper. Laura's guilt flickered in her eyes, but it was drowned by desire, by the way Jake's hands knew exactly where to linger, his youth making him fearless, reckless. The rain pounded outside, masking their gasps, but I felt the weight of it, the sin wrapping around them like a noose, tightening with every stolen moment. When they parted, Laura's face was flushed, her lips parted, her eyes haunted by what she'd done, what she couldn't stop doing. She adjusted her dress, but it was too late. The truth was written in the way her body still leaned toward him, hungry for more. I wondered how she'd face Mark, how she'd sit across from him at dinner, his grease-stained hands offering the same quiet love she was throwing away for a boy who burned too bright. Jake didn't care about the consequences, too young, too caught up in the fire of it all. But Laura knew deep down the cost of her choices, And yet she kept going back night after night, chasing that rush, that moment, when nothing else mattered but the heat of his skin, the way he made her feel alive. It couldn't last. Nothing that burns that bright ever does. Laura's lies grew careless, her excuses thin as the thread holding her life together. Mark noticed, though he didn't speak, his eyes lingering on her when she came home late, her hair damp, her stories fraying. She was torn between the man she'd vowed to love and the boy who made her feel alive, her heart a battlefield where guilt and desire clashed. Jake pushed her further, testing how far she'd go, and she went every time, unable to resist the pull of his touch, the fire in his eyes. One night, it all shattered. The town was asleep under a blanket of fog, the air heavy with the weight of secrets. Laura and Jake were in the shed, their shadows moving in the dim light of a lantern, its glow casting their sin in sharp relief. I watched from the shadows, my heart heavy with the weight of what I knew was coming. Her dress was on the floor, his shirt unbuttoned, their bodies pressed together in a frenzy of need, her gasps louder now, her hands clutching him like he was her salvation. But salvation doesn't come from sin. Not like that, not in the dark where the truth can't hide. Then Mark appeared. He'd followed her, his boots silent on the grass, his face a mask of pain and rage when he reached the shed's door. I saw him first, the lantern light catching the hurt in his eyes, deep and raw. Laura froze her breath, catching her hands falling from Jake's shoulders as the world stopped. Jake turned defiant, but fear flickered in his eyes, a boy caught in a man's game. Mark didn't speak, didn't need to. He just looked at her, his wife, the woman he'd built a life with, tangled in the arms of the neighbor's son, her betrayal laid bare in the dim light. Laura tried to speak, but the words choked her, her voice lost in the storm of her guilt. Mark turned and left the door slamming shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the night. She collapsed, tears mixing with the sweat on her skin, her body shaking with the weight of what she'd done, what she'd lost. Jake reached for her, but she pushed him away. Her eyes wild, haunted by the truth she couldn't escape. It was over, and she knew it. The fire had burned out, leaving only ashes and a broken home, a life shattered by a moment of weakness. This story is real, raw, human, a tale of desire and its devastating cost. Laura's out there living with the pieces of what she broke, carrying the scars of her choices. Jake moved on like young men do, but she'll bear the weight forever. If this hit you hard, smash that like button, drop a comment. Tell me, did she deserve it? Could you resist the fire? Share this with someone who needs a wake-up call, someone teetering on the edge of their own mistake. Subscribe, hit the bell, and dive into our next twisted tale. It's darker, wilder, and it'll keep you hooked.